Hi, my name is Saffron, and today I'm going to talk to you about how to write a book. Now, what makes me qualified to give you any sort of advice? Well, firstly, I've published more than 30 novels, and if I chose not to live in a capital city in Australia, it would be enough money to live on. And also, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I don't have any advertising courses. I don't even have a how to write book. This is just me wanting to share some advice with people who may be just starting to write, trying to work out how to navigate this world, because there's so much information out there and there are so many people trying to make money off teaching people how to write. And I think that a lot of this information should be free, and I wish that I had known some of this stuff before I started almost 10 years ago. So today I'm just going to go through the basic steps of how you go from nothing to having a novel published. The important thing I want to note is that this won't make you millions of dollars. The number of authors who actually make any sort of money from their books is tiny compared to the number of people that have published books. So please don't think of this as a get-rich-quick scheme. I've been doing this for 10 years, and as I say, it would make me enough to live on if I chose to live somewhere cheap. So instead, if you have a book inside you and you have voices in your head that won't go away, that's when you should be writing. You should not be writing because you think it's a good way to make money, because it's not. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's dive into the process. So this first video, I'm just going to go through the steps just one after another, and then I'm going to create other videos which actually detail each of those steps and give you live examples of me going through the process. So the first step is coming up with an idea. Now you might have a random thought that comes to you while you're sleeping, for example. It's just a cool concept, like what if you found out you had a clone, for example. Now that is a great idea, but it's not a story. You can't sit down and write a book with just that. You need characters. You need an arc. You need to know what conflicts are going to happen. And this is where I really enjoy brainstorming and mind mapping. So for the example I just gave you, I would write down clone in the middle of my little mind map, and then I would come out with what happens then, what conflicts might happen. So they could steal your identity. I'd write that down. You might discover that you are part of a government project. Write that down. And I would go through and I'd try to think of every little thing that might be related to that. And what you'll find is as you note down these ideas, more ideas come. So then you start thinking of this world. Well, what sort of world would happen where people have cloned you? So this is probably a futuristic world, right? What's technology like? What's government like? And just just jot down each of these ideas. It doesn't matter if they make sense. You don't have to put them in any sort of order. The important thing is to just get your brain ticking and get your subconscious thinking about this world you're creating. Write down everything you have. Once you've sucked your brain dry of everything to do with that concept, then you can start plotting. So this is sort of creating the skeleton of your book. Now, what I do is I use a program called Scrivener, and in that you can create sort of files for each chapter, and it creates a corkboard for you. So you imagine in real life you have a corkboard and you'd stick little post-it notes up for each chapter, for example. And you just want to jot down a one-sentence summary of what happens in each chapter. And the way I often like to do it is I usually know where I'm going to start, so I have an idea of how my character looks at the start of the book. And I have an idea of how it's going to end. And then basically you just have to fill in everything in the middle. So at 50%, there's usually a big change. That's how books are made. There's heaps of books and information out there on story arcs and the hero's journey. And I do recommend that you look at those, but don't get too caught up in it. The important thing, especially if you're writing your first book, is to just get it written. So what I try to do is I have a post-it note for each chapter, and I jot down one sentence, what's going to happen in that chapter. All right, so the main character discovers their clone. So I would write down, for example, they're out in the shops and they see someone that looks like them, they follow them and realize that actually they are exactly the same. What happens next? So then you go to chapter 2, jot down a summary of that. Maybe they follow this person home, for example. Keep going all the way through so that you have a logical sequence of events that gets you from point A to point B. This process is called plotting, and there is a bit of disagreement between two camps, let's call them. The plotters on one side and what's called the pantsers on the other side, and that comes from writing by the seat of your pants. One way is not necessarily right. Different people prefer different methods, and probably for most people it's somewhere in the middle. I personally like to have each chapter written out and planned in advance, because otherwise I find I write myself into a corner. If this is your first book, I do highly recommend you having at least some sort of skeleton or some sort of plan of how you're going to get from the start of your book to the end of your book. Otherwise, you will find that you are just meandering off into irrelevant story, and you'll end up having to delete it at the end anyway. So once you have your skeleton, you can start writing. And the secret to this is ass in chair. And for your information, I believe that this is actually the secret to life, the universe, and everything. If you can have the self-discipline to put your ass in your chair every day and work towards whatever it is you're working towards, whether that be a novel or a business or a degree, whatever it is, if you can make yourself sit down and work on it every single day, you will get there. And this comes from a lot of experience from me. I think that is probably the main thing that stops anyone from writing a book, because people always say that they want to write a book, but very few actually do it. And I think it comes down to this discipline. You have to put the words down, otherwise you'll have nothing to show for it. And just sitting there not writing is not going to get anything done. So when I was writing my first book, I set myself a rule. I had to write 2 pages every single day. And guaranteed I did that. And I was studying at the time. I had a job at the time. So it's not like I was not doing anything with the rest of my life, okay? But I still made myself write those 2 pages. And if you seriously want to get your book done within the next 50 years, then do the same. Even if it's 1 page, even if it's 100 words, make yourself a goal and sit and do that goal every single day. The other important thing, especially for your first book, don't go back, don't edit, and don't show anyone. Because you'll have created, for example, your first chapter and you'll be really proud of it, but I can guarantee you that there will be problems with it. And if you show someone, even a loved one, they might point out problems with it, and that'll dishearten you. Or they might give suggestions, and that'll muddy what your vision of the book is, and you'll start to act on those suggestions, and suddenly it's not the book that you envisioned, and you'll lose faith in it, okay? And the other problem is that people sometimes get stuck on this editing loop, so they, instead of moving forward, they'll just keep rewriting the first chapter over and over and over again, so they've done 20 revisions of the first chapter, and they don't even have a second chapter yet. And I can tell you from experience that by the time you get to the end of the book, you will realize all these things that you have to have at the start of your book. So any revisions you do on that first chapter will be irrelevant once you get to the last one. Now, as you write through this first draft, fill out your skeleton. So you might have had a few not quite fleshed out chapters in your skeleton before you started writing. Make sure you fill that out in this first draft. And as you're writing, so this comes back to that don't go backwards thing. As you're writing, if you think, oh, I needed to add that in the previous chapter, or, oh, I haven't foreshadowed this, or, oh, it would be cool if this happened, write it down to the side. Don't go back to that chapter and add it in. Don't go back editing things in the middle of your writing session. Just jot it down to the side, and you can come back to it during your editing step. And this is all related to achieving that daily goal. If your goal is to write 100 words, write that 100 words. Do not go back and edit, because it will take up your time and you'll find that you haven't made any progress. And the key thing here is that forward momentum is everything. With any sort of large project, and writing a novel is a large project, you need to keep moving forward. Otherwise, you'll feel that you're just spinning your wheels and you'll lose any motivation that you had, and your book will never get written. So if you're serious about writing your book and getting your message out there, move forward, put your ass in your chair, and achieve your daily goal. Now, after you've written your first draft, go back and do your first review. And my biggest piece of advice here is be kind to yourself. If this is your first novel, there are going to be problems. Okay, as an example, my first 3 novels that I published, I've now unpublished those because I can see how much was wrong with them. And that just comes from experience. So even the experience of writing through your book, if you get to the end chapter, you will have learned so much that if you go back to the first one, you'll suddenly realize that there is a lot of things that you should have done better. So don't be too harsh on yourself with that. Just work out what you missed. Work out the extra scenes that you should have added because, say, two chapters don't join properly. You need something in the middle. And fix big issues. Like if you discovered that a particular character actually needed to be 2 characters, for example, go through and fix that on this first review. This isn't about proofreading. This isn't about typos. This is about big story issues, and you have to fix those before you can fix the little things. So that's the first review. You want to fix the big issues so that you have a logical storyline. The second review is about fixing bad writing. So these are things like passive voice, poor descriptions, and stilted dialogue. Now there are lots of books on these different things, lots of blog posts. I will probably go into them at some point. But for now, I just want to go through each of the stages of the review. So the second review is sort of fixing these, let's call them sort of paragraph level issues, where you've got the story there, like the story is there, but the way you've written it might not be very good. So sometimes if you've used a lot of passive voice, for example, or poor descriptions, you might have a great story and yet it sounds boring. And that's just about improving how you write. And honestly, that comes with practice and probably is not something that you are going to get right on your first book or even your 100th book. There's always things to improve. But this is what the focus of the second review is, to try and tell your story in the best way that you can. And then finally, at least for my process, is a proofread. Now, I can't stress enough how important it is to proofread your novel in a different format to what you wrote it. So if you wrote it in Word, for example, and you try to proofread it in Word, you will not see the errors. It's the way the brain works. It edits out errors and we don't see them. So either print out your book, which uses a lot of paper, so it's not my favorite option, or export it, for example, to an e-reader so that you can read it on your phone. Now, not only does this mean that you can edit on the go, it completely changes the way that you will look at your book, and you will spot errors that you don't know how you missed in the first 2 reviews that you've already done, okay? You will be appalled at all the spelling and grammar mistakes that you've made, but don't let that get you down, just fix them, okay? So the proofread is important, but even more important is sending it for a professional edit. Yes, you need one, get one, pay for it. So many people, and I was the same, when I wrote my first books, I was still in university, I couldn't pay thousands of dollars for an editor, so I didn't do it. And now when I go back and look at those books, there is so much wrong with them. I had no idea how to use grammar with dialogue, for example. So those books, there's so much wrong with them. And that's another reason that I've unpublished them, because the quality of that edit is so bad that I would be embarrassed to have that up now. So do pay for an editor. It doesn't matter if you have the best writing in the world and eyes like a hawk for typos. You will not be able to see the edits or the problems in your own work. You have to get someone else to show them to you. And don't be disheartened when that book comes back covered in red, because it's a way to learn from your mistakes, okay? So take what the editor says on board. That doesn't mean you have to accept every single change. If they've changed something and you feel that it changes the core message that you were trying to convey with that sentence, it's okay to ignore it. But don't ignore their corrections to your grammar, corrections to spelling, things that are definitely right, if you know what I mean. So once you've had your editor look at it and you've made all the changes, you have to get it out there. This is at least if you want other people to read it. It might be that you wrote this novel just for yourself, or maybe your close loved ones to read, in which case print it or convert it into an EPUB and send it around to your friends, and that is absolutely fine. But if you want to give it to a more public audience, there are two main methods. The first is using a traditional publisher, and the second is self-publishing it. I personally have self-published all my novels, and I have my own reasons for that, mostly circled around the fact that I have control issues, and I don't like the idea of giving that control to a traditional publisher. Both are valid methods. There is so much information online about how to go through either of these avenues, and different options are right for different people. Having said that, do not go with a vanity publisher. Okay, these are scammers. They ask you to pay thousands of dollars so that they will publish your book for you. They don't do anything. They will not get you famous. They will not make you money. They are purely, I'm even going to verge on the edge of criminal, in that they take advantage of people who don't know any better. So do not go with a vanity publisher. Anything that they ask you to pay for, you could do yourself. So for example, they say that they pay for an editor, but you may as well pay for it yourself. They pay for a cover, pay a cover designer yourself. Okay, that way it will cost the same amount or less, and you get to keep more of the royalties. So I can't stress this enough. They are sharks. They will call you incessantly, and it's actually a really bad aspect of the book business. So do your own research, investigate the pros and cons of traditional publishing and self-publishing, but please avoid vanity publishing. So there we go, congratulations. Once you've gone through all those steps, you've written a novel, which is something that so many people want to do, but very few people actually do. So you deserve a big pat on your back. And even though it probably won't make you heaps of money, it's a massive achievement that you should be proud of. So well done. Now, keep an eye out for videos in the rest of the series where I'll go through each of these steps with live examples so you can actually see what I'm talking about. Thank you very much, and keep writing.